Just in case you're not sure what a buckthorn is, after this morning you should know. Here's one right here. It does contain sharp spines. So from a safety point of view, you need to be careful. We will have gloves for you here to wear, but be aware that when you grab this plant, there are some sharp thorns sticking out. So watch that. The other plant besides buckthorn that we're going to go after is bittersweet. Bittersweet is a vine, and this one comes from Asia. Buckthorn came from Europe. This is a very common characteristic of bittersweet. It wraps itself around other things. And sometimes these vines can get to be about yay thick right there. So this is, in a way, kind of a small one. And it's kind of funny, this one actually is wrapped around a grapevine. So here's two vines intertwined with each other. These can grow 40, 50 feet up into a tree. And so what we're asking you to do with the bittersweet is to cut it as high as you can reach, and also to cut it low to the ground. And that'll give us a good head start in combating this plant. And here's how bittersweet, how it damages other plants, especially trees. It's not the wrapping that hurts the tree, the girdling of it, it's the leaves. The bittersweet have large circular shaped leaves. When they come out, they shade the leaves of the tree that they're growing on. So what happens over time, the tree underneath doesn't get enough sunlight and the tree eventually dies. So there can be places where this bittersweet is so thick that's all you see is just a tangle of vines. And eventually the tree will fall over, and of course the vines continue to grow on it, and it becomes such a mass of vines and that you can't even walk through it. So it becomes a bad situation. This plant was brought to this country, as I understand it, as part of flower arrangements. And somehow it ends up out in the wild and causes all these problems. So this is definitely an invasive plant that we want to go after. Buckthorn, of course, is the other. Yes?
Is that real?
Yes, it is. Yeah, we cut it out there. We'll start with the root jack. By the way, buckthorn, that was filmed, I think, looked to me like the month of December, and she said the buckthorn still has its leaves. That's one of the problems with buckthorn. It's the last plant practically in the forest to drop its leaves, and the first plant in the spring for its leaves to open up. So it has a longer growing season than the other plants that are there. So it has that advantage, in addition to, many seeds. So you see how this works. This is spring loaded. This one is smaller than an inch, but it's good to demonstrate. First of all, whoever carries these to the work site, please do not put them on your shoulder like this. Best way to carry them with that edge facing down. It's not too sharp, and this is not meant to chop anything. This is meant to wedge things. Walk up to the plant with your tool. This is called a root jack, and you are going to grab that plant with the tool down low, and then you're just going to simply wedge it back out of the ground. And what I usually do, you're going to be working with a partner. One person can be pushing on the root jack. The other can help pull in the same direction to help get it out of the ground. Because the ground is wet, these should pull easier. That'll help. And when you pull it out, the roots are going to be covered with soil. And so what you need to do is try to get rid of as much of that soil as possible, and this is the reason why. When we're all done with pulling buckthorn, we're going to have a machine come in, a chipper machine, and they feed these trees, these shrubs, through the chipper. The chipper operators do not like soil on the roots because it dulls their blades. So the way to get the soil off, you have a couple different options. You can beat it on the ground, or if there happens to be a handy tree nearby, beat it against the tree. Or you can even try to whack it on your tool here. Anything to get the soil off, and then we'll put it in a pile. So you'll start seeing this pile grow, okay? So again, you can do something up to about 1 inch in diameter. Anything larger than that, you're probably wasting your time. It's too big to pull with this. If a buckthorn is too large, what we have to do is come back at a later time. We would cut that buckthorn off, and it would be great if that's all you had to do, but you know what happens? From that cut stem, new buckthorns start growing out of it. So what we have to do, within 10 minutes after cutting it, we have to dab it with herbicide. That'll go down into the root of the plant and kill the root so it doesn't re-sprout. So buckthorn, that's another way it fights you. It's just a hard plant to work with. It'd be simple if all we had to do is just cut them off and then walk away and be done with it. That's not how it works. And guess what? If you clear an entire area of buckthorn, guess what's waiting?
More buckthorn.
The seeds, that's called the seed bank. The seed bank is good for about 5 years. These seeds can germinate that long. So they're going to continue to germinate, especially if they're getting a lot of sudden sunlight. So just cutting the buckthorn and clearing it is only step one. There are other things you're going to have to do before you eventually get rid of it all. So it is a tough plant to work with. Okay? And again, just use it with the right size plant. There are many out there this size. So this is the appropriate size that we're going after today. If you're using a lopper, and by the way, our plan is that everybody gets to use the root jack and a lopper. So we're going to rotate. So you'll be working on buckthorn part of the time, and the other time using loppers with the bittersweet. So there's not too much to say about safety here other than obviously this is the cutting edge. So you don't want your hand anywhere near here. I ask that you not put these in the ground for the same reason when we don't want soil on those roots. The soil dulls the blades of the loppers. So don't stick them in the ground, please. If you're carrying them out to the work site, carry them like this. And then when you're using them, of course, only use them with the handles. As long as you're holding on to it like this, there's no way you're going to be cut. And just be aware of how close the next person is. So if you're reaching up to cut something, just make sure they're not nearby. So you probably should have at least 5 feet or so in between each other, so there's no chance of that. Also, we don't want to lose these, so when you're done using them, they will tell you they need to be stacked or piled somewhere so we don't lose them in the brush, because they're easily hidden there. Okay? Let's see what else. The bittersweet, again, reach as high as you can with it and then low to the ground, and that'll help. That isn't going to necessarily mean we're rid of the problem totally, but it'll give us a good head start this year. And we are working on a new trail. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but the Nature Center just expanded. We have this new property. We just had this new trail put in, and we're going after the bittersweet that happens to grow along that trail. So that's why we're choosing that area.
How long do you think it'll take to remove all the bittersweet from this?
You know, I've said, I learned a long time ago that we'll never ever be totally rid of buckthorn, and probably the same is true of bittersweet, but believe me, we will have come a long way in the amount that's growing on this property. And the main thing is we're trying to turn the advantage to the native plants. And when you cut a bittersweet, you're saving a tree. Remember what that guy said on the video earlier? He said, by cutting that, that tree may live 10, 20 more years. That's how important it is to cut this stuff.
How long have you been cutting it?
We've been at this for about 20 years. Yep. And you know why we didn't start earlier? Because we didn't recognize buckthorn and bittersweet as being a problem. We didn't realize what this plant was doing. So this is something pretty new. Like when I was in college, the word invasive species didn't even exist. No one was talking about that. So this is a pretty recent thing where we now recognize the problems that invasive species causes. and they're big problems sometimes.
How does bittersweet start? Like, how does it just...
It starts in the ground as a seed. Oh, by the way, that's a good question. People actually collect it in the fall as a decoration in fall wreaths, arrangements, like for the holidays. It has a beautiful orange seed, actually, in the fall. Bittersweet does. So we welcome people to come and collect it, and so we can get rid of it. But it starts as a seed, and it produces many seeds, just like buckthorn does. So you have a plant that produces lots of seed, you're going to have a lot of them.
Is there any particular time where there's like more or less bittersweet?
No, I've seen people go after it any time of year. The only time of year in the spring they don't use herbicide is when the shrub is pumping up. The herbicide doesn't work well then.
Yeah.
So, but otherwise they do it in the winter and so on.
What is it called, bittersweet?
Good question. Must have something to do with the taste of the fruit, I guess. Yeah. Bittersweet, I think it grows a few feet a year, but so if you see a bittersweet that's like that big around, I bet it's been growing out there for 30 or 40 years. Yeah, it can grow really thick.
Could a bittersweet, like, grow around buckthorn? Like...
Yes, it does. It grows on top of it sometimes. So we have places out here on the property where bittersweet is growing on top of buckthorn. And eventually the whole thing will just collapse from the weight, and it just is a mess. It's not good habitat, really. And you guys, I don't know if you're aware, if a bird eats buckthorn berry, it's like taking a laxative. It goes right through their system. So the genus species name is Rhamnus catharsis. So catharsis meaning, woo, it's out of you in a hurry.
You know who first invented root jack?
No, but I know that you can't buy a root jack in a store. We had to buy these from California. We found a place. And so it is a unique tool that you don't usually see in stores. We have a lot of work to do. So what we're going to do is we have enough loppers that you'll be sharing with a partner. We have enough root jacks, same thing. And then we'll make sure that your group gets a chance to use both, that you'll be pulling buckthorns and cutting bittersweet. All right, so we'll rotate.
So,
You'll watch and learn.
root jacks are going to be used for their purpose and their purpose only, which is to remove buckthorn. Yes. So there's two processes. There's removing the buckthorn from the soil, and then there's piling it over here. All right. So this instrument has a part that grabs the trunk, and this part right here is what helps you pull back on the plant.
Let's go, baby.
What you're going to find that's super tricky is that the plant itself is really wet. So you're going to have to problem solve and be patient with the root jack teeth grabbing the plant.
Yikes.
Okay? So here's the process. Come on over here.
That kind of looks like an owl.
Come on over.
That's what he said.
I can see.
You have to be 20%.
All right. So watch how the teeth open up to grab the buckthorn.
Insane.
Then you hold it. Here's the tricky part. You have the plant that's with you. So guess what? Your partner is to help you. Move it to the side. Ouch. And this is a male, so that one has thorns. And you're gonna pull back. Okay? Then you're gonna go farther down. And then with the help of your teammate, you're gonna continue pulling.
She know.
Okay? With the help of your teammate, you're gonna continue doing that. Okay?
Got it.
Now, when you get the plant,
You can't get one.
yeah. Oh, you can get it.
Yo.
Now, the tricky part is I'm probably gonna have to go in the other direction. So I gotta go on another angle with the root jack.
Don't hurt me.
I'm gonna have to do it again. So it grabs and you pull.
It's yellow. Oh my god. It's yellow.
Okay. Okay, now when you take it out, yay, look, at the plant I pulled. Okay, there's gonna be a bunch of soil on this. You must take out all the soil that's attached to the root, because these plants in that pile are gonna be chopped up and used for wood chips on the trail.
Oh, these are
So not only are you removing buckthorn for us, you're making wood chips for trails for us. So when you have all of the soil off of the root, carry your plant to the pile and put it in the pile. You are to stay on this side of the trail, please. All of these are buckthorns, my friends.
okay.
All right, again, the males are the ones that have the thorns, so be very careful.
So we've learned that buckthorn and what was the other one called? Bittersweet.
Yeah, bittersweet.
That they're taking over our community, and we helping remove it is very important and to having a healthy community.
I learned that like what these are.
Yeah,
You know,
I had no
that
idea
they're
what they
like
were.
a thing, kind of.
Also learned that they came here. I don't remember where from, but they're invading this property. And
Yeah.
there's a lot, and they're like taking up all the other plants like areas.
It's taking over other plants that are native to here and that need to live, and it can kill other species that are supposed to be here.
So now that you're more familiar with buckthorn and bittersweet, if you start looking around, for instance, like at your home, in your backyard, I'll bet it's very common to be growing there.
So, not even a month ago, we were in our backyard, and there was like a bunch of like weeds. And I didn't know what it was, but now that I think about it, I think it was buckthorn.
It probably was.
So much of it. We have to like use those plier thingies
Yeah.
to cut it.
It's one of the first plants that sends its leaves out in the spring. And again, one of the last plants to drop its leaves in the fall. So it has that really long growing season. Here's bittersweet right here. The leaves are kind of oval. And there's that orange fruit that I was telling you about that people sometimes collect in the fall. They like to have it, decorate their wreaths with it. And the buckthorn is right here. There's nothing special about buckthorn. I mean, it's so difficult to describe and even to photograph. If you want to take a picture of a buckthorn plant, it's not even easy to photograph. It's just hard to explain why that is too. So all this work that we did, do you think it's worth it?
Yes.
I agree. In our situation, if we want the right kinds of trees and plants to grow here, and if we want this biodiversity here at this nature center, we have to be able to control that buckthorn and bittersweet. I don't think we'll ever totally eliminate it. I think there'll always be at least some here, but that's okay. As long as we preserve this biodiversity and improve it, that's what we're after. That's what's important.
Do the fruits on buckthorn actually taste good?
No, in fact, they taste bad. Did I mention that this morning? Like if a bird eats it, it passes through their digestive tract real quick?
Have you ate it before?
No, I haven't tried it. I don't really care to either. I don't think it's usually, I've never seen it on a list of edible plants for people. So I guess if you were in a survival situation, maybe, and there was nothing else to eat, maybe you could try it, but again, I told you, it's like a laxative. It does not help your digestive tract at all. So I think there's an assignment in your unit coming up that it talks about buckthorn, and I believe it asks you to pick a management technique where maybe you're hand pulling it, or you use herbicide, or there's one called a biological control. Have you ever heard of that? It would be like if somebody could find a bug, let's say, kind of like, say, an emerald ash borer, and we released it, and it eats buckthorn, that bug would do our work for us. Wouldn't that be great? We used a bug to eliminate a plant that used to grow around our pond. It was a flower actually, a very pretty flower called purple loosestrife. The problem with the plant was that it spreads rapidly, and again, it outcompetes all the native plants. So a bug was found that supposedly only feeds or eats purple loosestrife. So we thought it was safe to release it. Can you see the danger of using a biological control? Yeah, some places refused to use it because they were worried that bug would start eating other things that they didn't want to have eaten. But we took a chance because we went and learned about it. This bug had been studied for like 10 years, and they had fed it supposedly every kind of plant that grows here in the Great Lakes area, and they couldn't find another plant that the bug would eat. So I felt pretty safe that I think we could use it, and within about 2 or 3 years, the purple loosestrife was pretty much gone. So that was a really effective tool. But nothing like that has been found for buckthorn or bittersweet. And wouldn't it be wonderful if the deer ate it, or if the deer rubbed on it? And they don't. They don't care for it at all.
What was the bug called?
It was, you're not going to be impressed with this. It was called Galarasella. I mean, that's the genus name for it. Remember, every species has a genus and a species name. And so there wasn't even a common name for it. And it was about that big, a tiny little brown thing that it was hard to even see it. But what they would do is eat holes in the leaves of the purple loosestrife, so it weakened the plant so the plant wouldn't flower. And if the plant doesn't flower, it doesn't produce seeds, eventually it goes away.
How did you get that? How did you get those bugs?
The bugs were sent to us by the government, the United States Department of Agriculture. They would send them in the mail in a box, and we actually had to pot some of the plants. We had to plant them in little toddler swimming pools, and we would empty the little bugs onto the plant, and then there would be a tomato cage. You'd put a tomato cage over the plant with a screen on it so the bugs couldn't escape. And you'd put about 25 bugs on each plant. And you'd wait about 6 or 8 weeks, and within 8 weeks, the bugs had multiplied from 25 to about 200. Then you'd take the plant out to the pond, pull the screen off the tomato cage, and just leave the plant there. And the bugs would hop off that purple loosestrife plant onto the surrounding plants. And after a few weeks, you go back and pull the plant back in. By that time, the bugs had spread to the other loosestrife, and they were doing their job, started eating holes. That's what you'd notice, that the leaves would all have these little holes in them. So they were doing their job.
So I have like a lot of Pachysandra in my backyard.
Yes.
Would that be invasive?
Pachysandra is considered an invasive species in forests. So you have to think about what area are you talking about. Just like earthworms. I said earthworms are a problem in forests. In your garden, probably not a problem. You can think of it that way. But in a forest, they are causing issues. So same way with Pachysandra. If it escapes into a wooded area, it can become a problem.
Yeah, because there's like a wooden fence separating our yard and the neighbor's yard.
Yep.
So it's like right
And that's a ground cover, and there are other kinds of ground covers that can cause problems like that too. So you have to be careful. If you live next to a woods, you know how we can fight this invasive plant problem? They say select native plants in your landscaping. That's one of the best things you can do. If you go to the nursery and buy all these other plants that came from somewhere else, they could cause problems. All right?
Why don't invasive species ever adapt to the environment?
Well, that's a good question, and some of them eventually do. There are some people that would argue, why bother to try to get rid of them? Because they're just going to become part of wherever it is that they're now growing. Our problem here at the Nature Center is we don't have a very big nature center. And if we allowed a plant like buckthorn just to take control, it would be everywhere in the Nature Center. And that's why we don't want that to happen. But there are people who argue that, hey, some of these plants, and buckthorn is found in Minnesota and in the Upper Peninsula, and it has moved all over the place. Some people would argue that maybe it should just become part of the nature, but it limits the ecosystem. Instead of having this beautiful variety of plants, you have very few plants. And that's not good. You know, we know that's not good. But usually it takes plants and animals hundreds of years at least to really adapt to their surrounding area. And that's why many of the introduced plants that came to this country aren't invasive, because they don't survive that well unless they're being taken care of.
Can the one that's kind of like a vine kill?
Bittersweet.
Bittersweet kill other bittersweet?
Probably. Yeah, and you saw how it wraps around each other. I saw it wrapped around grapevine, I saw it wrapped around each other, I saw it wrapped around buckthorn and other things out there. Yeah, it's all about, you guys know this, it's all about competition. The plants are struggling for what? Yep. Sunlight, water, the nutrients in the soil, room to grow, they're all struggling with each other for that. So yeah, I could see where one bittersweet might outcompete the other bittersweet. And then if it does, the whole thing may fall down, because if one of them dies, there's nothing going to hold it up there, right? So, okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for helping us this afternoon. All that work that you did is going to make that new trail a better place to walk. And we'll continue that work. And I'd like to say, gee, we got it done and we don't have to worry about it anymore. But when you're working with these plants, you have to keep at it. So we will. But you guys helped a lot. You helped us make it better. And you saw this morning how ecologists, how they monitor it, how they count, measure, and so on. And that's just as important as dealing with it, because you want to monitor, you want to know what's going on. So you got to take the time to look at it closely and then go after it.